Okay, yes, indeed. It's time for yet another edition of One on One. My name is Titi Oyinsan. It's always a pleasure, always an honor being your host. And I'll be doing what I can to do justice to this topic today. It's one of those topics that we talk about in passing with friends, colleagues all the time, and we didn't really see it coming that there would be such an exodus happening right in front of our eyes. It's the Japa wave. The impact of the Japa wave on the Nigerian talent pool is our focus today. In recent years, Nigeria has witnessed a significant migration wave, and it's known in the local parlance as the Japa wave. And this is where skilled professionals they leave the country in search of better opportunities abroad. A lot of them are going to places like Canada, some remote parts of Europe, even other parts of Africa in some cases. I have a friend that actually relocated to Brazil, but they leave the country in search of better opportunities. And while that opens doors for individual growth, it's having a profound impact on Nigeria's talent pools, leaving critical sectors like healthcare, tech, education, grappling that widening skills gap. Once again, this is One on One, and my name is Titi. So I'm going to dive into the root cause of this issue, this talent exodus, and its long-term effects on the country's workforce. What can we do to retain and attract top talent in Nigeria? Is the Japa wave irreversible, or can we reverse this brain drain? Hopefully, we'll be able to get to the bottom of this today. Hello, Tochukwu Osakwe. Welcome to One on One.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Okay, so I feel like this is water cooler gist. This is do people still stand by the newspaper vendor stand? They still do. Vendor stand gist in every bus, you know.
I
People are
haven't
talking
seen that in 10 years.
there are still vendor stands. I know of one in Alausa somewhere around here, not far from the Fela Shrine. Um, People still stand around the papers and look at at the headlines. But Jakpa, it started like a joke and became a huge deal. There's some crazy statistics out there. I know you can probably share a few with us. But let's maybe you should give us a little introduction into the reality. How would you define this Jackpot wave, and what are the main drivers?
So for starters, I would say that Japa is a Yoruba word that would mean to run, to flee, or if possible, to hurriedly leave a particular place, right? That's the local definition of Japa. Well, of course, in a more serious tone, I would just simply say it is migration of people from one country to the other in search of greener pastures. Uh, it could be for education, could be for better jobs, better living conditions, what have you really. So, and of course, there are a lot of reasons why people are making such decisions to hurriedly leave, in quotes, their country.
Yeah.
So, I mean, across the world, we're experiencing inflationary pressures left, right, and center. Here in Nigeria, for example, dollar is dancing a willow, and
Ooh.
that's impacting food, it's impacting transportation, it's impacting a lot of basic necessities that in the average individual will need to survive. So everyone thinks, okay, so I'd rather just go to where the dollar is as opposed to having to convert dollar
Mm.
to or convert naira to dollar to do whatever transaction or payment that I need to make. Some people go under the guise of they need better education. I'll give an example. I have a friend who earns works in a very big organization, and without exaggerating, goes home with as much as 5 million naira per month. But guess what? He packed up and left. And largely because I think in 2020, he had one health scare, and
Okay.
he was admitted in, I would say, one of the top 3 hospitals in Lagos. And he was there for a week. Was on ventilators. They were pumping him with also antibiotics and all that. And all it took for him to get well was his friend, a pharmacist, who just walked and looked at the prescriptions and what was written on the chart. I was like, these things are not necessary. And he just went to his car and got some very simple antibiotics that he took. Someone who literally couldn't swallow his own saliva for 7 days started eating within 4 hours. So there's wrong diagnosis. Our healthcare system is not trustworthy. And then, of course, the insecurities. Insurgencies left, right, and center. There's the high rate of kidnapping. There's police harassment, brutality. So if you turn left, you turn right, look up, look down. And in Lagos, anything can actually happen to you. For example, you could be driving across a bridge and some trailer falls over you, and there are no consequences for these things. So a lot of people think about all of these things and they're like, let me go to where things work. It may not even be that they're looking for greener pasture. They just want to feel safe. So these are a couple of reasons why people actually Japa, as we call it.
Yeah. Oof. It just feels like you hear it over and over again. It's like a broken record, you know. But then there are a few sectors in Nigeria that are probably experiencing the biggest talent drain, the biggest brain drain due to this mass migration that we've been experiencing over the past few years. But what sectors are they, and why are those the ones that are mostly in focus?
So I don't know about sectors experiencing Japa the most. I think certain skill sets, or should I say certain professions, are being hit the most when it comes to this. So, for example, the medical profession, whether nurses, doctors, pharmacists, lab technicians, lab scientists, their skill sets are in high demand in different parts of the world. So we see very high emigration, or should I say migration, of such professionals out of countries, not just Nigeria alone. Of course, because of the technological advancement that is beginning to happen, there is a high demand for software developers, back-end developers. So in the tech space, in the medical space, we seem to see high attrition or high rates of people actually just disappearing or leaving. So I wouldn't really say it's a peculiar to a particular sector, but rather I would say it is peculiar to certain skill types or skill sets.
Okay. So those skill sets, of course, they include those in the medical profession. A lot of
Yeah,
doctors.
those in
Uh,
tech
I don't
space,
even
software
know.
developers,
Yeah, tech.
UI
Yeah,
UX
of course,
designers, the likes.
sure. And then people with soft skills as well. People that do things like hair care. You know, people that have handcrafts. Apparently, they are in high demand abroad as well because people pay premium for those services abroad.
Absolutely.
I So now let's talk a bit about how this loss of skilled professionals is actually affecting our economy. I honestly, I personally, one of the doctors that worked with me when I was having twins, I just recently realized he had also fled abroad, and I was like, oh my goodness, what am I gonna do? You know, and so that's just me, just one individual. But I'm thinking about the economy itself, how workforce productivity is being affected. What are the realities?
So, I mean, for example, As a result of these migrations, as we call it, the impact on organizations, especially for employers or even those who are left behind, is increased workload. Because first and foremost, talents are scarce, literally. So if quality hands have left the country, those who are remaining may have to take on this workload, pending when HR is able to find replacements. And not just replacement, quality replacement, because, well, the quality hands have moved. And then that leads to disengaged or disgruntled employees. Because if you are paying me the same thing I've been earning, and then I'm taking on more responsibilities as a result of people who traveled, I'm going to be upset. I'm going to feel disgruntled. I'm going to feel overutilized. And then on the side of knowledge management, most of your key staff, they are cutting away with years of experience, of knowledge. They're taking it to another country. So that's also impacting the organization. Yeah, employees are experiencing burnouts. There is brain drain. We begin to see things like shortened employee tenure. So in some organizations, for example, it's very difficult to find an employee who has spent more than 2 years. So you go to a place, maybe you probably have worked there before, and you go there and you realize that you don't know anyone there. And you're asking for the average length of stay per employee there, and it's less than 2 years. And then, of
But
course,
doesn't that have something to do with the company's culture, something to do with the way they treat their staff? Are you sure it's not something they're doing wrong?
Japa is a cancer. Like even organizations that are known as great places to work, it's almost nothing that you can do. So in my experience, for example, we are very intentional about all of the engagement activities or retention strategies. We are constantly looking at what is global practice. We even had to relax our dress codes. We even had to give people autonomy to work from wherever they want to work. Stay at home, work from home. What have we not done? Inflationary palliative allowances. We've given room for people to switch careers and all that. But guess what? People will still leave. The external factors are way stronger than the internal factors. And so culture is not enough to keep your talents. It really is not enough. So these are the implications for employers, for organizations, and even for the employees who remain.
Well, so how is this now affecting the company's recruitment strategies? Because that probably means that they're taking less talented people to fill those roles. I'm not trying to say the people coming in are less talented. I'm saying people that are probably not as experienced or versed in a particular field to fill those gaps, because the more talented ones or the more skilled and experienced ones are leaving. What sort of strategies are we adjusting ourselves to right now when it comes to recruitment?
So, for example, organizations are beginning to embrace strategies like gig economy, more of hybrid work arrangement. So when I say gig economy, you are beginning to see talents who now work for multiple organizations. So it's no longer a case of I own this talent, because no organization can own a particular talent right now. So we now begin to see creative employment contracts. So I could have this talent. We have an agreement that between the hours of 8 to 10, I have your time, right? And that same talent has an agreement with another organization that between 10 and 12, they own his time. So we're going to see a more sense of shared talents, because the quality ones
in high demand. They're in high demand.
So if you say you want to monopolize that talent, then you have to pay through your nose.
Premium.
And at the end of the day, I mean, is it really worth it?
Mm.
So
I
we.
actually remember a particular radio host that we discovered sometime later that he was actually doing 3 different radio programs every day on 3 different radio stations because he was in such high demand. And he had already made requests. He had been granted leniencies from different organizations, and the one I used to work for then had already arranged a vehicle to go and pick him from wherever he is to bring him to the studio, do his show, and go home. And he was still working for 2 other people. I found it almost, unbelievable. And sometime later, we discovered that. So he said he was going on leave,
Mhm.
and he went for a 2 month leave, and then we just started seeing pictures of him in another country. And apparently, he had probably said the same thing to the 2 other radio stations he was working
Mhm.
for. Probably got paid that extra 2 months with the hope that he will come back. So I completely understand where you're coming from. Um, Sharing talents is an interesting
Yep.
strategy, but is it a sustainable strategy? That's the question for me. I think for doctors, I think a lot of doctors do that now.
Yep.
If they work in a particular hospital on a Monday, they'll probably be somewhere else on Wednesday and somewhere else on
You didn't even
Friday.
have to get that far. I could work. I mean, you find me in one hospital this morning. By night time, I'm in another hospital.
Wow, wow. That's
Crazy.
how few doctors we have per, is it per capita? How do they term it now? Um, but if we are making these adjustments, what does that mean for the next few years when it comes to our infrastructure, our the actual career growth opportunities? So people were once thinking about climbing the ladder. Is there still a ladder to be climbed? Are there still people at the top to look up to, since there's such a talent gap at this point?
Well, of course, yes. There are still people to look up to at the top because, well, if we look at the profile of people who are leaving, so it was funny because we had to work on the board reports in my organization, and we realized that the demography of talent that we were losing were between ages 25 to 35. And something was common to all of them. They were mostly unmarried.
Hmm.
So,
Okay.
um, for someone who's married with kids, he will think thrice, not even twice, before he
Sure.
decides to up and move. All right. So we still, I mean, the older ones who provide some form of visionary leadership are still
Yeah.
very much um, in organization. So, and then, so I always say this that in as much as the Japa thing seemed to be more disadvantageous than advantageous, but I think there are more wins to it as well. So it creates room for others in the organization to upskill themselves and move up the ladder.
I was actually
Really.
going to say that. Moving up the ladder for the younger ones, right? Or is it mostly the younger ones, creating a space for the younger ones? Are they the only ones that are there to fill that talent pool?
So from wherever actually, so it depends on what level of your career you have gotten to. So you may be quite older, but
Yeah.
still at some early years in your career or position in the organization, but that gives room. So a space has been created for you to occupy. So what organizations are now beginning to do is development starts really early now. There's no time waiting. So competencies that you would expect that, oh, a manager or a senior manager should be developing starts
Yeah.
from entry level. So you are already preparing people for an executive role
Yeah.
3, 4, 5 years before they are ready. So if such so it becomes like a contingency plan that if this even happens, there's some level of readiness in,
Hmm.
in quote younger people to fill up the shoes. And then again, organizations are beginning to relook their strategies. There's no longer working in silos anymore. So we're beginning to foster some form of collaboration such that everybody is interlearning each other's skills. We're beginning to build more utility employees in the organization. So in my organization, for example, you could have a staff who can function in 5 different skills.
Wow. Okay.
So if there is a need to fill up a gap because of an emergency, we don't even have to look outside. The person can do that.
Okay.
Just add a few zeros and the person is smiling to the bank.
That's where I was going. That you're adding money to that. Not every company would want to add those few zeros.
So
Some
it's
would
cheaper to add
eventually take
zeros.
advantage. You have to add the zeros, but not a lot of companies are doing that. Adding the zeros is key, but then there are some companies who end up leading to that employees burnout, and then obviously some form of resentment could develop if someone is always having to fill in for this particular person who just doesn't show up more than 3 times a week. But because you don't want to lose that talent that comes in the 3 times a week is okay for you, but then someone else is filling in that gap. So I feel like there's a lot that still needs to be done in that particular area, especially since companies are already bleeding. Their budgets are almost always just on the line. I
So
heard something today called the alligator mouth, or is it the crocodile mouth? The lines need to close a little. I'm thinking about what needs to happen. What sort of long-term solutions do you think need to be implemented by not just the private sector, the government as well, to reduce this brain drain? What do you think?
so now I was going to actually how do I put this now? When you mentioned adding more zeros, could now so it's a temporary fix, right? Pending when a suitable hire can be gotten to replace the gap that has been done, right? Now, how sustainable can these things be? So we begin to see also organizations are actually getting more creative with their retention strategies. So you don't even have to wait for when the person wants to up and leave. So especially now, I begin to see that most talents are beginning to find jobs that are seen as meaningful to them. So it's not just a workplace anymore. It's so I begin to see heightened focus on employee wellness, well-being, emotional well-being, financial well-being. So measures are put in place to ensure that whatever it is you think you're going to look for out there, it is right here. So, for example, and organizations now pay for their employees to do their MBAs and master's
Wow.
program while still in employment here in Nigeria.
Okay.
So such allowances are made. So the company pays it for you, and you work out some form of repayment for that staff. That's retaining that staff. So he doesn't even, because the whole drama of trying to go abroad it's expensive. So you're going on the guise of masters. You can do that masters right where you are in your organization. There is that. Employers are now beginning to create some form of financial assistance. So we have periodic inflationary palliative measures to cushion the effect of inflation that's happening. We are beginning to have things like rent allowance. We are beginning to have things like car allowance, children education allowance. So whatever kind of need that you think an employee will possibly need, organizations are beginning to factor it into their pay packages. When I begin to create cultures where, because now the new set of workforce we're seeing, try the Gen Zs, they're looking for meaningful work. They're asking questions: how are you adhering to ESG practices? What are you doing to your communities where your businesses operate? What's your charity like? They want to see these things. So these are
CSR. Your CSR.
It's CSR. So it's not really about money now, money cannot really sustain so much. You have to create you have to be conscious about creating an environment that makes an employee feel like he's seen or heard. It's not just about coming to do work and leave. We even have in-house, I don't want to use the word therapists, we call them employee assistance program. So you have a mental health specialist on retainership. So if you feel a type of way, for example, you have someone to speak to. So it's organizations are beginning to get creative.
It's a whole new world. It's a whole new world.
Actually. It's the employees market now. So if you don't want to lose talent, then you need to bring what they are going to look for out there into your organization. So
wow. So there was the whole remote work movement. I'm going to say, immediately, well, during COVID, after COVID, a lot of companies were doing the whole work from home thing, and it did feel like when people were asked to sort of go back to the offices is where the challenge now became. It became a little more challenging for people to get back on that train. That it just felt like the whole world had shifted in another direction, even though companies like Zoom, as at last year, actually they're the ones that benefited the most from people working from home. They actually invited all their staff to come back to the office at some point. The people that benefited the most from people staying at home, inviting people to come back to the office, it should tell you something. I'm just thinking about what organizations in Nigeria now can do to leverage on this issue of remote work, maybe global collaboration, to sort of retain talent. I don't know if that makes sense. The same way someone can still work in Lagos in 3 different organizations, for instance. Why can't they also still work in Lagos for you while they're abroad?
So whether we like it or not, a lot of organizations are very traditional, and it's a struggle to adjust to the remote or hybrid work arrangement. But I would say forward-thinking organizations would not have a problem with having their employees work remotely. I mean, from top of my head, I can think of certain organizations, probably the big fours. I have colleagues who work in some organizations that they've only been to the office twice or thrice in 2024, and the work is still ongoing. I think organizations need to now invest more in collaborative tools that helps to manage employees' workloads, track KPIs remotely. So we agree that we have A, B, C, D KPIs to meet, and we have weekly check-ins to ensure that these things are being done. So, that's a major way that organizations can actually help with managing all that. Now, even so, like the example you gave, for example, asking people who have worked completely remotely for the last 2 years to all of a sudden return. I think it's just plain wicked. I think it could have been done, should I say, in batches. So rather than from completely remote, just make it hybrid. You can do a 2 days work from home and 3 days work from the office, or 3 days work from home and 2 days work from home. Eventually, they ease up into the system, and they eventually get to adjust. But whether we like it or not, it's going to be difficult to revert to completely on-site. So we conduct interviews for talents, and the first question they're asking you is, what's your remote work policy?
Wow.
And if you say you don't have a remote work policy, that's it. They're not interested in that interview anymore. You have lost that talent. So it's organizations are now forced to actually adjust. Organizations who would insist on having talents work on site completely will regret it sooner or later.
Yeah, they'll lose a lot of their talent.
Because why am I going through the endless travels or traffic when I can actually work for an organization that lets me stay in my house and work? Because it pays me well. And I dare say that people are more productive when they work from home. And
Well, you dare say so? I heard that as well. I saw some statistics on that. I think 2 years ago about how much more work is done while at home because not as many hours are spent on the road.
yeah,
There's no 1 hour lunch break, you know. Then there's less stress. So the person is actually more encouraged to work, longer hours. But why is it that it didn't really register in terms of the amount of money people were making? Well, people, is it that maybe it was more of an economic thing? um, because in the end, people's salaries, nobody could think of getting a pay raise while they were staying at home. So people were making
yeah.
more money at this point in time. So the only way they could get a pay raise was for them to start saying they were going back to the office. But to wrap this up, really, do you think there's ever going to be a reverse Japa movement? Do you think people are going to start coming back home sometime soon to contribute to our country's development? And what do you think the conditions need to be like for that to happen?
So I completely agree that we would have that exodus of talents who had jackpot return. So I was speaking with an older colleague a while back, and she said something. She said that this is not the first time that the whole jackpot thing is happening. That in the early 80s or late 70s thereabouts, there was that mass exodus that also happened, and most people returned
Mm.
when things seem to have settled. Um, and we are beginning to see that. So we begin to see employees who left the country under the grounds of, oh, they were going to further their education, and then found jobs over there. They are now requesting to want to come back. So organizations are beginning to have conversations with those talents, because if we're being honest, it is not as easy as it is. And a lot of people don't actually paint the true picture of life outside their home country. It is tougher there. All right. So they we're going to see more of people coming back. Now the
Mm.
question is, when they come back, is Nigeria, for example, ready to receive them? Because they've tasted better. They've tasted better infrastructure. They've tasted better amenities. They've
Yeah.
tasted better living conditions. Um, are we ready for that?
Mm.
But the only solution I would give is, I think it's the people who've gone over there to see how things are done in an organized environment. They can be the change that we need here. Because if they come and saturate our climate with all of the orderliness, good behavior, integrity levels, or whatever that they've had to abide by over there, and come
Yeah.
and saturate here, I think
Yeah.
things will get better, really.
Yeah. I have a comment here from Kumbi Deoti. More productivity at home is also now getting debatable, which is something we've already debated on, already as we've been talking. Not anymore, maybe. Maybe with the new generation coming up, that there are a lot of distractions at
And There,
home
there are
as well.
instances. There are instances where you call a staff during work hours for a meeting, and you're hearing "Ikorodu mile 12, Ikorodu mile 12" in the background. But so some people
Yeah.
still work from home most times as opportunity to go grocery shopping, or buy food stuff, or to go make their
Yeah.
hair at the salon and stuff. So I think what organization need to do is build um, their managers on team management virtually,
Hmm.
or invest more in, like I said earlier, collaboration tools, such that you can see all of your employees on a particular platform, and so
Yeah.
they're making their inputs on a particular platform, so you're able to tell whose productivity levels is dropping and those who are actually doing the work.
You have a point. You have a very good point there. Um, let it not be that we need our bosses to become monitoring spirits. They always were. They always were monitoring spirits to a certain extent, but at some point, we
And
felt
sorry,
we were.
if I could chip this in actually.
Go ahead.
So
Go ahead.
I would say that so recruitment strategies now need to evolve to be able to cherry pick talents that are self-driven or talents that have some form of self-leadership who may not require to have a boss look over them to get jobs done.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of people that organizations will begin to look out for.
Hmm. And it's actually come up quite a few times in interviews and meetings I've had, where you have a conversation with a recruiter where they say, "Oh, how much supervision do you need? How much work did you do in the place where you worked before? And were you the one supervising, or were you being supervised?" And I think the answers to those questions are very, very key.
Yeah.
And if you get those things right, I think we're well on our way to being a lot more productive with regards to the hybrid or work from home strategies. But we've really pushed it on time. Would you believe it's already over 30 minutes? But thank you so much for joining us today on One on One. Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I feel like we've been able to, knock on a few doors with this conversation. Not all of them have opened yet. We'll probably come across a few more things to talk about very, very, very soon. But this is an ongoing conversation, this Japa movement. Hopefully, we'll come back one day when we see the reverse Japa movement starting and revisit this conversation. Thank you so much, Tochukwu.
Thank you for having me.
All right, then. For those of you who would like to send comments, contributions to One-on-One, it's really easy. You can always send us an email. That's just send an email to dynamitepodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also use that to join us and maybe book your own conversation on this podcast. Tochukwu Osakwe there is an HR professional there. He's a recruiter. He's also really, really one of those people that's passionate about how this is impacting Nigeria's growth, and hopefully this is just scratching the surface. Hopefully, it's sparked a few nuggets there in your mind. Maybe a conversation you have sometime soon will be more informed with regards this Japa movement. All right, then I'm going to be wrapping it up right here on One-on-One. Until I come your way next time. Once again, my name is Titi Oyinsan.